Welcome to the Cultural Human Resources Council Respectful Workplaces in the Arts training video on workplace harassment. This approximate 30-minute training video has been produced as a resource for employers to become familiar with their obligations with respect to workplace harassment and workplace sexual harassment. In this video, the term employer includes not-for-profit boards and arts organizations. The term cultural workers includes individuals who may be referred to as employees, self-employed artists, contractors, and volunteers. The objective of this video is to identify situations leaders and boards of directors of cultural organizations may encounter and to equip them with practical takeaways and best practices to prevent harassment or to fulfill their obligations should complaints and/or incidents occur. For a resource setting out the legislative obligations employers and cultural workers may have with respect to workplace harassment, we invite you to also view the Cultural Human Resources Council Respectful Workplaces in the Arts webcast on harassment for your home province. This is available, along with other resources, at respectfulartsworkplaces.ca. This video will present 4 scenarios dealing with different situations in which workplace harassment and workplace sexual harassment may occur. Each scenario has been designed to focus on 3 distinct issues that could create harassment-related obligations for employers. After each scenario, we will identify the key issues the scenario deals with, explore where employers typically mishandle these situations, and recommend best practices for addressing each type of situation. To minimize repetition, the scenarios will each focus on the specific issues, challenges, and the key takeaways they have been created to highlight and reinforce. Recognizing that there will be some overlap among the scenarios, at the end of the video, we will provide general considerations for employers along with a questionnaire to reinforce the intended takeaways.
Selena, the lead actress in a new production, has asked to meet with Gina, the creative director. Selena describes how Brad, the lead actor in the production, has been making her feel uncomfortable when they perform a particular scene that requires the actors to embrace, because he always trails his hand from her shoulder, down her back, and lingers on her butt. Selena has told Brad, in front of Jim, the stage manager, that there's no reason for Brad to be doing that, as it's not in the script and it makes her uncomfortable. Brad's response is that he gets wrapped up in the heat of the moment, and it's his creative liberty to feel and act passionately during the scene. Selena tells Gina she dreads having to rehearse the scene as she feels Brad is crossing the line, and his behavior makes her feel vulnerable. Selena asks Gina not to tell Brad, who is very prominent in the industry, that she has complained.
This scenario illustrates a situation that could lead to a sexual harassment allegation made by Selena against Brad. The key issues in the scenario include work that involves touch or contact, bystander observation of an incident, and agreeing to keep a complaint confidential. Common pitfalls: work that involves touch or contact. Certain types of work, such as intimate acting scenes, dance, and stunt work, can create situations that are susceptible to complaints that an individual has violated appropriate and required boundaries. Employers often mishandle these situations by failing to set expectations from the outset through communication of work or performance expectations, for example in writing through contracts, policies or codes of conduct, or through assistance of external expertise such as intimacy coordinators. These proactive measures can prevent situations, such as in the scenario where Brad is going beyond what is required of the scene and expected by his co-actor, Selena. Bystander observation of an incident. Situations similar to Scenario 1 are commonly not addressed appropriately because the employer has failed to communicate the expectation that observers should report incidents that could involve harassment. Employers often do not equip bystanders with practical means to report incidents of harassment, which is important because bystanders often don't want to be labeled as snitches or don't want to experience retaliation for reporting an observed incident. In this scenario, Jim, the stage manager, has likely observed Brad's conduct when the scene was rehearsed and performed, and certainly observed the complaint raised by Selena directly to Brad. However, Jim does nothing to escalate or assist with resolving Selena's concerns. Agreeing to keep a complaint confidential. Given that victims of harassment are often fearful of retaliation or of losing future opportunities, it's not uncommon for complainants like Selena to request that their concerns are not escalated or brought to the attention of the alleged harasser. This is particularly the case where the perpetrator is considered to have authority or influence, similar to Brad, who is prominent in the industry. If Gina agrees to keep the complaint confidential, this creates potential liability for the organization, as it could fail to meet its legal obligation to respond to the situation, which could include an obligation to investigate. Preventative strategies and best practices. To address issues and potential liabilities identified in Scenario 1, cultural organizations should consider the following preventative strategies and best practices. Communicate boundaries and expectations of work, projects, and engagements up front. This can be achieved through contracts, codes of conduct, policies, and performance discussions, such as table reads or facilitation by intimacy coordinators where appropriate. Organizations may also leverage external policies, conduct protocols, and performance guidelines that may exist, such as those established by unions, guilds, and associations. Implement practical means for bystanders to report observed incidents that could involve harassment or sexual harassment. This could be achieved through direct communication using written forms, electronic means, or hotlines, which can also be administered through third-party agencies providing these services. Guidelines should be communicated regarding the details that bystanders should report, that is, the who, what, where, and when related to an incident, to ensure organizations can fully and appropriately respond. Also, make bystander reporting an expectation, which is particularly feasible where it can be established that bystanders also have obligations to reduce workplace harassment risks from a health and safety perspective. Communicate through policies, procedures, and programs that complaints and incidents of harassment cannot be maintained in confidence in any circumstance. The organization should make it clear how individuals can bring and escalate harassment complaints. For example, communicating that complaints can be directly made to the organization or through the individual's union or guild where applicable. There should also be recourse through external complaint mechanisms where a complaint is against a person in authority or where it cannot be investigated impartially because of the alleged perpetrator's role or influence. External recourse may be particularly important for non-unionized individuals.
After wrapping up recording a music video for her latest single, Stella, a popular solo artist notorious for her diva behavior, joins the dancers and crew, who the director, Kelly, has taken out for drinks at a bar to celebrate. When entering the bar, Stella stumbles and runs into one of the dancers, Juan. Even though the stumble was not Juan's fault, Stella yells and swears at him. "Go back to where you came from." Later, Juan is sitting at a table with Kelly, and they are scrolling through some photos of the video shoot that have been posted on social media. Juan notices a picture that includes him, which Stella has just commented on, saying, "This guy is useless. He should be sent back to where he came from." Juan shows Kelly the post, who tells Juan, "Drink up and forget about it. We're here to have fun. We should be celebrating."
This scenario illustrates a situation that could lead to a harassment allegation made by Juan. Juan could specifically claim that Stella's behavior constitutes discriminatory harassment, including based on his race, ethnicity, or place of origin, and bullying, including cyberbullying. Scenario 2 involves the following issues: tolerance of regular misconduct by prominent individuals, what constitutes the workplace, and taking complaints and incidents seriously. Common pitfalls: tolerance of regular misconduct by prominent individuals. It's not uncommon for individuals, like Stella, to become well known for routinely mistreating others based on their self-perception of prestige within the industry. It's also not uncommon for organizations to fail to recognize that this conduct could fall within the definitions of harassment or bullying. Leaders or boards of directors may tolerate or enable this behavior so that it becomes accepted and expected. Examples could be an overly aggressive agent, a diva performer like Stella, an unreasonably demanding choreographer, or a threatening donor attempting to leverage its financial influence over a production. What constitutes the workplace? Leaders may also mishandle situations like the one depicted in Scenario 2 by not recognizing that the setting where the offensive misconduct occurs is the workplace, which triggers their obligations to respond appropriately. Kelly's dismissiveness when Juan shows her Stella's offensive post, based on her assertion that they're there to have fun, may be motivated by her misunderstanding that the bar where the rap party is being held is a workplace for the performers of the video shoot. Because the rap party was organized at the bar by Kelly, the rap party would be considered an employer-sponsored event, and any harassing behavior that occurs there could constitute workplace harassment as a result. Taking complaints and incidents seriously. A further way employers commonly mishandle situations like Scenario 2 is by not taking a complaint or incident seriously. As a dancer, likely seeking future opportunities in his discipline, Juan may not only be offended by Stella's post, but, given the reach of social media, he may have genuine concerns about how it may affect his reputation. It's likely that, by showing Kelly, the director, Juan expects her to take action in response. Kelly may not appreciate that the social media post constitutes cyberbullying and triggers the employer's obligation to provide protections against and respond appropriately to this type of misconduct. Kelly's cavalier response not only creates liability for her organization and potentially herself, as she's not taking steps to meet obligations to address incidents of harassment, it also undermines the perception that the organization takes misconduct of this nature seriously. Kelly also could potentially make the situation worse by encouraging Juan to just drink up and forget about the incident. It is possible that Juan's consumption of alcohol may not cause him to forget about it. Rather, if he continues to be upset and loses inhibitions, he could escalate matters against Stella and/or others during the event, which, in light of Kelly's inadequate response, could increase the exposures to liability in this situation. Preventative strategies and best practices. To address the potential issues and liabilities identified in Scenario 2, cultural organizations should consider the following preventative strategies and best practices. Similar to the preventative strategies identified in Scenario 1, establish conduct expectations proactively and practically through verbal and written means, and do not condone behaviors that could constitute harassment against others. While there is often the temptation to condone the misconduct of someone who is prominent in the industry or a particular artistic discipline and dismiss this conduct as, that's just how they are, this can lead to serious liability for organizations. If necessary, leverage the reality that organizations have significant obligations to protect individuals against workplace harassment, and on this basis, offensive misconduct cannot and will not be tolerated. Consider whether a situation may be occurring in the workplace. A workplace is defined more broadly than organizations may expect. A workplace can include a theater, a rehearsal space, an installation venue, a gala, after-work social events involving colleagues, post-performance feedback over drinks at a bar, and so on. Even if harassing behavior takes place outside of the workplace, employers may be able to hold cultural workers responsible for inappropriate off-duty conduct that harms or has the potential to harm the employer's reputation. Do not consider social media and cyberbullying to be beyond the scope of workplace harassment. Cyberbullying on social media can constitute workplace harassment. Even if the comment is not posted from the workplace, cyberbullying outside of working hours can constitute workplace harassment that should be addressed by the organization.
Claude is an assistant curator at a gallery, overseeing the installation of paintings for a show that is set to open the next day. The installation contractor, Xavier, is known to be the best in the business, and the gallery often uses him, especially on complicated or time-sensitive installations. While he is setting up the lighting, Xavier starts complaining to Marie, the curator, about the installation plan. Claude overhears Xavier and walks over to explain the vision for the show. Xavier responds by calling the installation plan weak and states that Claude must be gay. Marie is standing nearby and hears their conversation, but does not intervene because of the pressure to make sure the show is ready to open the next day.
Scenario 3 illustrates a situation that could result in Claude complaining of harassment, including discriminatory harassment, against Xavier. The key issues in this scenario include liability created by third-party contractors, condonation of misconduct by the employer, and incidents which occur under performance or deadline pressures. Common pitfalls. Liability created by third-party contractors. Employers may be aware of their obligations to protect their cultural workers against harassment perpetrated by third parties. However, employers may not realize that discriminatory harassment, meaning harassment that can be connected to protected grounds under human rights legislation, can be committed by third parties. It does not have to involve individuals employed by the same employer. In this scenario, Xavier, the third-party contractor, has exposed the gallery to liability by his discriminatory treatment of Claude, including by criticizing the installation plan on the basis that it is weak and Claude must be gay. The Supreme Court of Canada has found that in certain circumstances, organizations can be liable for violations of human rights legislation by non-cultural workers, such as contractors, where discrimination, including discriminatory harassment, has a sufficient connection to the employment context. Further, employers' responsibilities to protect the safety of their workers extends to protecting them from individuals who are not workers, such as contractors, patrons, donors, and other non-cultural workers. Condonation of misconduct by the employer. In this scenario, Marie has a direct obligation to address the contractor's misconduct against Claude, who reports to her. Marie's inaction, having observed the incident firsthand, increases the organization's potential liability in the situation, as she could be considered to have condoned this misconduct. Also, her inaction and apparent tolerance of the contractor's behavior could undermine any existing employer policies related to harassment and discrimination, and could create the perception that the organization does not take this type of misconduct and its obligations seriously. incidents which occur under performance or deadline pressures. Time pressures to get the job done quickly, or where it's felt the show must go on, can lead employers to mishandle complaints or incidents of harassment. In this scenario, the pressure on Marie to ensure the show is ready to open the next day likely motivates her to ignore the contractor's behavior towards Claude. This may be because Marie, like many others in positions of authority, has not been trained on how to respond to this type of misconduct when under performance or deadline pressures. Preventative strategies and best practices. To address the potential issues and liabilities identified in Scenario 3, cultural organizations should consider the following preventative strategies and best practices. Establish conduct expectations and ensure they apply to everyone at all times. Where contractors' services are connected to the workplace, organizations should set conduct expectations up front, either verbally or ideally in writing, such as in the terms of the contractor's services agreement. Organizations can leverage their responsibilities to protect individuals in the workplace as justification for these terms, and the consequences for violating conduct expectations should be clearly stipulated. For example, it could be stipulated that violations could result in the termination of the service contract. Do not condone misconduct perpetrated by contractors. When misconduct occurs, it should be immediately addressed, even if by initially communicating that it is unacceptable and advising that it will be addressed fully at the first opportunity. In no case should ongoing misconduct be tolerated based on the contractor's reputation in the industry or because this contractor is the known go-to resource. Take all possible measures to protect cultural workers from ongoing harassment risks. Where job time pressures exist or where misconduct occurs during performances, measures should be taken to minimize the impact of the conduct, and, when feasible, organizations should make a full response to the incident, including conducting an investigation as may be required. For example, in the scenario we just explored, the curator could separate the contractor and assistant curator and then address the issue thoroughly at the first opportunity.
Jeffrey, a literary agent, is working on some final details organizing tomorrow's lecture and book signing for his most prominent client, Michael. As Jeffrey is working, Michael calls him and says he wants to discuss the logistics for the book signing the next day. He asks Jeffrey to meet him at his hotel suite. Jeffrey goes to Michael's suite. Michael opens the door, wearing only a robe. Michael offers Jeffrey a drink. Jeffrey accepts the drink and sits on the sofa. Jeffrey asks Michael what he wants to discuss about the book signing. Michael sits beside Jeffrey and begins complimenting his looks and making suggestive comments. Jeffrey is uncomfortable, but doesn't feel that he can leave.
This scenario illustrates a situation that could result in Jeffrey claiming that he has been sexually harassed by Michael. The key issues in this scenario include abuse of power, reluctant reporting, and what constitutes the workplace. Common pitfalls. Abuse of power. While Michael is Jeffrey's client, given that Michael is likely aware that he is Jeffrey's most prominent client, Michael may perceive that he has power over Jeffrey in this situation. Unfortunately, certain people who may feel they wield power and/or influence over others may exploit others by abusing their power or authority over them, sometimes promising or implying a benefit or advantage will be extended in exchange for their acceptance of the misconduct. Individuals starting their careers or who are avidly seeking opportunities to fulfill their dreams may be vulnerable to this abuse of power type of misconduct. Reluctant reporting. Perpetrators of this misconduct are typically aware that, like Jeffrey, the victim of any unwelcome conduct may be reluctant to complain or assert their rights. This may occur even where conduct expectations may exist or where there are requirements to have others present, for example, an equity representative, in situations that make them vulnerable to being mistreated or harassed by someone in a position of authority or influence. What constitutes the workplace? Again, like in scenario 2, employers may fail to recognize that, given the requirements of Jeffrey's role, Michael's hotel suite could be considered a workplace, which could result in liability for this misconduct if it's proven that proper steps were not taken or enforced to assure Jeffrey's safety. Preventative strategies and best practices. To address the potential issues and liabilities identified in Scenario 4, cultural organizations should consider the following preventative strategies and best practices. Employers should ensure cultural workers understand their roles and responsibilities when they experience or witness harassment. Cultural workers should be encouraged to come forward with concerns and informed that they should do so because they have the responsibility to act in the best interest of their own safety and that of others. Further, employers should ensure that they practice what their policies state and make sincere efforts to address issues so that cultural workers are more likely to come forward. Consider how to increase reporting of incidents. Part of this involves setting expectations in policies, protocols, and codes of conduct, for example, to ensure cultural workers understand how and to whom to report issues. Organizations and boards may consider engaging a third-party agency to accept complaints on the organization's behalf. This increases the likelihood that cultural workers will be comfortable coming forward with an issue that they may not want to raise internally, particularly where they are not represented by a union or guild. Proactively identify where issues, similar to the situation in Scenario 4, could arise, such as where work requires overnight travel, where there may be a power imbalance between the parties working on a project, where cultural workers may be required to work alone or in isolation, or where, by practice or convention, individuals may be required to meet one-on-one with people in authority to discuss work or performance requirements. Workplace harassment has become increasingly challenging and risky for organizations to navigate. Public awareness of high-profile cases, Me Too and Time's Up movement activity, enhanced legislative protections, and expanded worker entitlements have emboldened those experiencing and observing this type of workplace misconduct to bring incidents and complaints forward. Given the changes in the legal and social climates and the rise in workplace complaints and incidents, it is critical for arts organizations, large and small, for-profit and not-for-profit, and their cultural workers to understand how to proactively contain this type of misconduct and to ensure they are aware of their obligations. Organizations should also strive to achieve more than mere baseline compliance when it comes to their workplace harassment obligations. Ensuring safe workplaces boosts productivity and quality of projects, performances, and productions. Also, not making efforts to foster respectful working environments or taking workplace harassment seriously could have public consequences. Individuals observing or experiencing this type of mistreatment may escalate to external authorities, such as human rights tribunals, or resort to social media shaming, which could result in serious reputational consequences for cultural organizations and their leaders. Thank you for viewing this Respectful Workplaces in the Arts training video on workplace harassment. Please note that the content is not intended to be legal advice. Should you face situations similar to the ones discussed, you should assess them on a case-by-case basis and seek advice as necessary. To maximize your familiarity with the content and key takeaways, please take a few minutes to participate in the quiz that will conclude this session. For further information on the topics discussed during this training video, please visit respectfulartsworkplaces.ca.